Welcome back to another episode of District Divided. I am one of many hosts, Amit Singh. I'm joined by Matt Regan, Kadeen Wiggins, aka K-Dot. I got LC, Lautaro Cabrera, and I got Spencer Brudig, who has a hard-on for Steph Curry still. We may get into that in a little bit. We are going to begin with the DC State of the Union, your DC Sports wraparound coverage segment. We are also going to be talking about the rise and death of the Super League in Europe. That was one of the craziest 48 hours I've ever seen on social media. It was incredible. LC is going to break down what the league was. We're going to give our thoughts on it. We're also going to talk about Kevin Durant naming his top 5 players that he's ever played with, pausing after naming 4 of them, and then concluding with the only one he possibly could have, Serge Ibaka. Forgetting Russell Westbrook, who is on a tear right now. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're joined by Benjamin Robinson, who is author of grindingthemocks.com. It is a mock draft aggregator site. And you know what? I'll let him tell you more about it. You're going to see him here pretty soon. How are you boys doing today?
Excellent. I'm
Great.
ready.
Loving life.
So excited for this hour.
I'm ready to rip it on these Europeans.
Best of my 168 hours of my week is right here with you boys.
Right here, right now.
I like potting with my secondary crew, you know?
That's painful.
Wow.
Are you a main host here? Are you a main host?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put this out here right now. Here's the thing. If you are one of the 40 people that watch this, spread this like wildfire, because
Please.
I need Kadeen to realize that this is his primary podcast and not his secondary.
I actually have a theoretical to the group. Is it better to be the main host of a 40 view podcast or be the secondary tertiary guy on a 10,000 view podcast?
Gotta be the former primary main host on a 40 view podcast.
Spencer sold out in a second, though.
Yeah, Spencer had no problem with that.
Yeah, of course. I would be the 8th character on Kadeen's other podcast. Dude, let me just occasionally get in there. I'll do an occasional
exposure.
We're bleeding
segment.
like the Super League, man.
Yeah.
We're supposed to have the fourth mic's supposed to be a revolving chair, so I mean the door's open.
All right, dude, I'm there. I'll catch you guys later.
We're now groveling in our intro to this podcast. All right, anyway, let's just jump straight into it. Lots of sports to talk about. We're beginning with the State of the Union, and we're going to begin with baseball with the Washington Nationals. Still plenty of time left in this season. They are 7-9 on the season so far. Last week, they were 3-6. They have moved up to 4th place in the NL East, and we are ahead of preseason division favorite in the NL East, the Atlanta Braves, showing just how unpredictable this season has been so far. This week, we play the division-leading New York Mets, followed by the Toronto Blue Jays before next week's episode. Now, on to hockey. The Washington Capitals, first place in the East. They are doing very, very well. They've had some ups and downs more recently, but there are only 10 games to go. The team in 5th place, remember, top 4 make the playoffs. The team in 5th place in that East division, the New York Rangers, and they are 10 points behind. So pretty secure. Just need to see it out, and then boom. Playoff time, Caps are in. We are looking good. Now, the Washington Wizards, 6 wins in a row. They welcomed fans back into Cap One Arena. The only team with a larger win streak right now, the New York Knicks are relevant once again. They're on a tear, 8 games in a row for the New York Knicks. And shout out Russell Westbrook, just going right back to our Wizards real quick. 27 triple-doubles this season. He is the first player in NBA history with at least 25 triple-doubles in 4 different seasons of his career. His first one with the Wizards. Unbelievable from him. He's also the most clutch player in the league, apparently, based on field goal percentage. Most clutch field goal percentage player in the NBA right now. As of right now, the Wizards are the 10 seed, and they would be in the play-in tournament if the season ended today, but it does not. There is still a handful of games left to go. The Washington football team, Alex Smith, congratulations, has officially retired from the NFL. He had some parting shots to give to the team, but we're not going to get into that. We're going to celebrate his career. The former number 1 overall pick in the 2005 NFL draft, calling it a career. Now, here's the trivia question for you guys. There are now 3 active players from the 2005 NFL draft class. I'll give you 2 of them. I just need you to give me the third. Aaron Rodgers, Richie Incognito. Who is the third one?
Got it.
And I knew you'd get it immediately, but who else has it?
I'm gonna go with Dan Marino.
Okay, Dan Marino.
I don't know, like Deshaun Watson or something, or Deshaun Jackson.
Nope. Spencer, got a guess before Kadeen wins it?
Fitzpatrick.
It's Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's right.
Damn.
Yep.
You nailed it. Ryan
Wow.
Fitzpatrick. Kadeen, I assume that's what you had. It looked like that based on your reaction there.
That was it, because there's a great story that just came out about Fitzpatrick and the text message he sent Alex after he got the injury.
Oh,
And how
yeah.
he regretted. He immediately regretted.
Hey man, I know what you're going through. I once tweaked my knee too.
But to see Alex's comeback text is, I think my injury is just a little bit different, but it's just great. It's just
And just for how different it was, 17 surgeries required for Alex Smith. So not quite what Ryan Fitzpatrick was talking about.
Yep.
What do you need 17 surgeries for? I feel
He almost
if
lost
your
his leg.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
compound,
that's what I was gonna
compound
say, like-
fracture, infections. It was bad.
My
It was
God, man.
really, really
Yeah.
bad. But he clearly wanted it to come back on the field.
Yeah.
No,
I
that
wanna-
is- oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Kadeen.
Well, the ESPN doc that they had, it was like the third, was it over the outside the line? Whoever did it last year, where it was like it was chronicling his entire injury and like his comeback. It was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. If you haven't seen it, check it out. They got enough clips on YouTube. Just search for it. But it's just, Lord knows how that man ended up playing another snap in this league is insane, absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Led the team to the playoffs as well. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. All right, I want to talk about the Nats. Went to my first game in person a long time. My dad was in town. Went to it. Good experience. I went for the fries. Upon your guys' advice, they were not that great.
How was the popcorn?
How was the popcorn? I was going to ask. Yeah.
Didn't go for it. Didn't go
Garlic
for
flavored,
it.
ranch flavored
Ranch.
popcorn. or
I wouldn't know.
popcorn?
I wouldn't know. I also wouldn't have anything to compare it to on it.
Did they win or lose?
They lost. They played the Diamondbacks.
Probably should have gone with the
Honestly,
popcorn. I think it would have changed things.
I'm worried about these Nats. I just don't think they're good. I mean, you look at it, their lineup. Yes, you have Juan Soto. He is a top, arguably, I mean, definitely a top 5 player in the league. You have Trey Turner, who is a great second best player to have on the team. After that, yes, Ryan Zimmerman off to a good year. But like, are you really going to rely on Starlin Castro? Are you going to rely on Kyle Schwarber? I mean, this
Yeah,
offense.
Josh Bell as well. They're
Okay.
guys. They're guys, and we also were hit with COVID very early on. It's a super early season.
It's early, and then you factor in like, what does Strasburg have? Scherzer, he's not that same elite pitcher. So I'm not saying, obviously they're 7-9. It's early in the season. You know, you're 10% of the way through the season. But if you actually just look at it from a pure player standpoint, and everyone wants to point to record of their 2019 team of having, 1931. Yeah, they had Anthony Rendon, right? They had Brian Dozier. They had Howie Kendrick. They had a Cy Young winner in Max Scherzer. So I don't know. Like, I'm hopeful for the Nats. It was great being at the stadium. Kind of a big fan of just having all that space yourself, no bathroom lines, no concession lines. But from an actual on-the-field product, the game, Trey Turner hit 2 solo shots. They did not threaten other than that. Juan Soto gets walked because no one wants to pitch him. They don't have anyone behind him. So I don't know. If I was, as a Nats fan, I think it's not a great on-the-field product.
I mean,
Are there,
listen.
are there any other concerns from Nats fans that they might be past it and it's time to start the next phase?
Just want to add a couple things. So when the Nats turned their season around, when they won the World Series, and you asked what does Strasburg have, what does Scherzer have? They have World Series rings. May 24th, and they were 19-31. They turned the season around. Next thing you know, we're on our way. Para is back. I'm not concerned. It's way too early on. The baby shark movement, that's the Para reference right there.
Yeah.
We're going to be fine. Plenty of time left. I'm not concerned.
Isn't
160
Paro?
games or
Is he in
something
AAA?
ridiculous.
Yeah, but who cares? He'll come up when he needs to. Totally
It's
fine.
entirely too early. And until we have the full fandom back at Nats Park, we still have not gone and celebrated our championship. We are still the champions, in my opinion, because the COVID season doesn't fucking count. So this is what it is, and until we can pack that park back again, just the vibe and the feeling isn't there just yet, and I still think this team right now is just in this kind of modicum of stuff until things start getting rolling again. I think that there's a lot of the mental aspect with this team, and you got to give them a break. We're way too early in a baseball season. It's entirely too long. Too many things can happen. Just chill out. Chill out.
Chill out, Matt. Jesus.
Questions. How much were tickets for our loyal audience watchers?
They were like, I mean, I didn't go Diamond Club. Walk past Diamond Club looks nice, Kadeen. Might splurge for that next time.
How was that? Yeah.
I had second level seats, so like mezzanine, they were like $75 a ticket.
That's not that bad.
No, it wasn't bad.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
Also, Oakland Athletics on a 12-game win streak.
But it's entirely too early. Is the thing we just talked about that? You're peaking too early.
Is Billy Bean out there on the field taking shots? I mean,
Is that why they're
does
on a
he still
12-game
never
winning?
watch games?
Maybe.
Who knows? I don't even know if he's still a part of the organization anymore.
Is he still jacked?
Is he alive?
Is Brad Pitt?
Yeah, Brad Pitt's fine.
Brad Pitt's in his prime right now, buddy. Okay.
Ooh.
What's with the time of Hollywood? Come on. There's a couple movies coming out right now. You want to get into the film thing? Let's get into the film thing. I'm just saying. Brad Pitt.
He's looking great.
Just wait.
It's one hell of a State of the Union, boys. All right, so now moving on from, what was it, football that we were talking about, and then basketball. We cover women's sports as well. The Washington Mystics had no draft picks last week. They did not trade in and get any, but they did sign undrafted free agent guard Blanca Milan to a deal after the draft. She attended the University of Maine, where she played for 5 seasons and is from Spain, so a bit of a fun fact there. And the schedule was also released. The Mystics will play 32 games this season. They'll be playing each team 3 times with the exception of the Phoenix Mercury, who they'll play twice. Why the Mercury specifically? No clue. Couldn't tell you. But May 15th is the opener. It's at 1 p.m. against the Chicago Sky. It is a home game in Congress Heights at the Entertainment and Sports Arena there. Now, moving on to soccer, the Washington Spirit played 2 games. The very first one, future GOAT of U.S. soccer, Trinity Rodman, 93rd minute, assist to Ashley Sanchez. Her very first start in her young NWSL career. Just a dominant display, clearly the best player on the field. And she was also probably the best player on the field again, but this time in a 1-0 loss to the Orlando Pride. Alex Morgan played for the Orlando Pride. We got Emily Sonnet and Kelly O'Hara back to U.S. Women National Team players. Kelly O'Hara starts a whole bunch. Just fell short. Ashlyn Harris, the goalie for Orlando, saved a penalty. We had a goal called back. Kelly O'Hara had scored. It was bullshit. But here we are. Don't matter. We're still a great team. And we got one final game on Tuesday against I've forgotten who. And now DC United. How about it? Hernan Lozada, first game in charge, 2-1 win over New York City FC. To show the level of confidence he has in the squad, he specifically requested Audi Field was 3 yards shorter because he felt they weren't match fit. And that's as far as he could make it in terms of cutting it down. So, hey, it worked. We got 2 bangers, absolute bangers from Brendan Hines Ike and Russell Knaus off a set piece. And that is going to conclude your State of the Union. The DC United players, DC United team, end up playing as the New England Revolution this Saturday at 8 p.m. They go up to New England for that game. Cool. Now let's talk more soccer. Elsie, this Super League
oh my God.
was an insane idea. Can you walk us through it a little bit?
What a disaster. So I've been struggling a little bit on how to explain this to Americans. And I mean that because American sports are so different than sports in the rest of the world, and particularly soccer, which is such an international sport. I was talking to my wife who was saying like, oh, it's weird that they don't have drafts in Europe. And like, let me make the record straight. No, the weird thing is that there are drafts here. Everywhere else, there's no drafts. There's nothing like it. So to understand this, you have to understand that in Europe and in South America and in other places of the world, the teams that have the most money get to buy the best players, get to poke young players from other teams and train them as their own and put them in their own teams. And there's sort of, it's a very capitalist sport where like the teams with the most money are continuously the best and don't really fall from the top unless there's some scandal, which there happen. And so these teams that have, you know, literally 100 years of legacy of winning championships, they have a fandom base that is just gigantic. And in this move, what they did was basically say, look, we are historically, not currently, but historically the best teams in the world and in Europe. And we know that if we make another league, we're going to make more money than if we play our local teams every Sunday and nobody watches that. And to try to compare it, it's kind of like if the big markets in the NBA try to make a separate league and said like, oh, don't worry, it's not going to interfere with the NBA. We're going to play on a different schedule, but like, you really know that without these big markets, the NBA is just viewership is just gonna drop so much. And so these teams decided to make a super league, completely disregarding basically anyone who was actually involved in playing the games. So no players were consulted, no coaches were consulted. There were executives of the teams that were in the league that said, I didn't know about it. And so it was basically a move by 5 presidents / executives of some of these teams that wanted to make more money. It's as simple as that. And for me, I think the enraging part is that in their statement, which again, this is 12 teams, top teams in Europe historically say we're going to make a new league. In their statement, their argument was we don't get enough competition. In our current leagues and where we currently play, we just don't play good enough teams. And first of all, that is fucking bullshit, because let me start by just giving you a little bit of a rundown. Barcelona saying we don't have enough competition. Didn't you lose 8-2 against Bayern Munich very recently? Like, do you want more competition than that? You want to lose 9-2? Like, I don't understand what your argument is. Number 2, Milan, AC Milan, the last Scudetto they won, the last Italian league, was 2011. I mean, what do you need more competition for? You haven't won your own local league. Get to the finals of the Champions League. I don't even know if they know what the Champions League is anymore. Arsenal, I'm sorry, Ahmed, if you can maybe tell me this. When was the last time you won shit to say you need more competition?
FA Cup.
Listen, man.
FA Cup last year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So not in recent memory, right? So all these teams that actually cannot even win their own local leagues are saying, oh, we don't have enough competition. Fucking bullshit. This is about money. And let me tell you one more thing, which I really want to highlight, and I understood as I dove a little bit deeper into this issue. I thought it was a crazy idea, right? I mean, you introduced this as a crazy idea. When you look at who led this idea, it's actually not insane. There was a 5-person leadership committee, and it was the president of Real Madrid, who was an engineer and politician, never played a single minute of soccer. The second person was Andrea Agnelli from Juventus, who was the son of a bunch of Juventus chairmen and organizers and owners, never played a single minute of soccer in his life. He was just put into the leadership and grew in the team. And then 3 Americans, Joel Glazer, who is also owner of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, never played a single minute of soccer. So obviously just sees sports as a business and nothing else. Second American, John W. Henry from Liverpool, also an American billionaire who made his money through some stock manipulation technique bullshit or something, never played a minute of soccer. And the third one is Stan Kroenke, also owner of the Rams, the Denver Nuggets, the Avalanche from the NHL, the Rapids in the MLS, never played a single minute of soccer. And so these people they're nothing but businessmen, and they made a business move. And then the world just said, like, you don't own this fucking sport, and just send it right back to them. So that's my explanation of what happened. And I think when you look at who did it, it's not that crazy, because if you look at it from a business perspective, it makes sense. They wanted to make more money, right? They jump on a Zoom call and said, how do we make more money? And so they came up with this idea. I'm glad that the world responded the way they did. It lasted 48 hours. As soon as fans, players, coaches, again, who had not been consulted about this, started to push back and say, this is bullshit, this is going to destroy our local leagues, we ended up, the teams ended up starting to pull back and say, okay, fine, we will not participate, and FIFA will sort of pretend like nothing happened, and continue to let them play in the normal leagues as it will.
All right. That was a great breakdown. I want to preface this by saying I am an Arsenal fan, and when I first heard about the European Super League, my first reaction was I was just glad we were invited, to be honest. You know, we have really fallen off from the top. I was just glad we were in there. Second thing, Jose Mourinho, only manager ever fired from the European Super League, as he was like in the middle. Also, shout out Jose. He is the special one. And I'm an American supporter. I don't understand a lot of the smaller, specialties of a 4th division team. Like I don't get hype for an Arsenal FA Cup game against, a 4th division against Brentwood or whoever we're playing against. Like that doesn't give me the hype, but I appreciate that for what it is. My take on the European games, which I would say other than the domestic games, the high level domestic games when you're in a battle, I would say, those are definitely the games you remember the most. You remember Arshavin scoring to beat Barcelona. You remember Henry scoring at the Bernabeu. All right, you remember Ozil scoring to beat Bayern Munich, and those are special games because they're so rare. We were a good enough team to be in that place, and now, especially Arsenal, they've fallen on hard times. They haven't been in Champions League in 4 years now. It'll change next year because we're going to win the Europa League. Not a big deal. Obviously. Here we go. But I'm going to cherish those wins so much more. So you get in the system, and I could see the European Super League in 2 years from now, 4 years from now. Maybe it's cool when it starts, but I could see a situation where it's Arsenal beating Barcelona at Camp Nou in an April game, and I'm just not caring because Arsenal are in like 8th place, and it does nothing.
Exactly.
It does nothing. So
and that's
there's no specialty anymore. Europe is not a right. It's something that you earn, and if it's just a given, it takes away a lot of specialties. So that's my take as an American fan. Again, I don't get pumped for watching an early FA Cup game. I'm sorry, English fans, but you do. So I'm going to let you drive that decision. That's not for me. That being said, Europe is holds a special place in my heart. Those are the biggest games that I've been through as an Arsenal fan. And if they become the norm, then what's the next level? Like, what am I even getting excited for anymore? So that's my take. I gotta go. I'm still committed to this podcast. I love you guys, but
I'm going to continue your argument. I'm going to continue.
Right. We love you too, Regan. And hey, catch the rest of this. This is going up on YouTube.
Oh, of course,
You'll be able to see what he says.
Well, Kadeem, still let me know if there's that number 8 spot available on your podcast. Happy to be that guy.
Matt, you got to go.
Yeah,
I just heard your door. Yeah.
The thing I want to know is I want to be in that room. What sort of backdoor mafioso stuff must have taken place to were guns held to people's heads? Because that was the craziest turnaround where you had all these teams jumping in. You had all this media blow up. ESPN was going bananas over it. All of the European news agencies were going crazy. And then all of a sudden it was like, no, just kidding. We're completely rolling back. It made everyone look like fools. And what happened?
I think it's the same argument that made this league in the first place. They realized that they would not be making this money because of the amount of backlash that they had. I think it was just like, okay, we cannot financially go forward with this, because even the players said, you can promise that you're going to make 3 times the revenue in broadcasting that you're making right now, but we guarantee you that the league is going to start to decline. Like Matt just said, your teams are not just going to stay good because of name recognition, but the competition won't be that good.
I do want to say something, which is that the teams that backed out, you'll notice the ownership, just like LC was talking about. Who ran this? It was Real Madrid, it was Juventus, and it was the 3 American owners for Manchester United, Liverpool, and Arsenal, respectively. You will have noticed that those 3 clubs, those English clubs, pulled out last. Okay? The ones that pulled out immediately, Roman Abramovich for Chelsea. Then you had the City, I think they have either Saudi or Qatari owners. I think there were 2 different motives. For the more international owners, it was not only money, but it was also, hey, I do want to prove my team is the absolute best. And if we create this Super League, my plaything is better than your plaything. Roman Abramovich has lost tons of money since being owner of Chelsea. He doesn't care about the money. He wants to win. He wants to be the number 1 brand. And I think once he saw the level of backlash, he goes, well, this isn't what I signed up for. I just wanted to prove my team was the best amongst the best. So boom, I'm pulling out. Fuck this. I'd much rather have the fan support and continue. Then the Qataris go, you know what? That's also true. I don't like it either. We'll just pull out. And so once you see these teams pull out, then the pressure was overwhelming on everybody else to go, hey, there is no way in hell we can stay in here because our hand has been shown, and we can try this again in 2 or 3 years. I guarantee you they're going to try this again for money.
Yeah. That to me is the biggest thing to me is that this is inevitability. This is going to happen. And the thing is that, right now, what I will give European soccer fans is just a dumb American that doesn't understand the sport and think it should be called soccer, doesn't understand why it's called football, even though football, whatever.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. The idea to me that I think the reason you get these guys to pull back so much is that, unlike lazy, stupid Americans, when people over there don't like what it is that they see is happening, they collectively get together and start ready to burn down shit. So it really gets you to pause the brakes, and the powers that be got to really think about the shit before they do it. Whereas Americans, we would just say, oh, man, we don't like that. Complain on Twitter, and that's the end-all, be-all.
Ordering Domino's and complaining. That's it. Exactly. That's all we're doing, yeah.
So make a podcast about it and complain.
Yeah.
Right. So I give them all the credit in the world as far as that stuff goes, right? Yeah. But then if I'm looking at it as an American who doesn't really pay attention to soccer, look, this is way outside my depth. I've had 3 people contact me over the last few days trying to break this thing down so I could talk about it on it because I didn't understand what the hell was happening. But then when you start looking at some of the numbers, like there are certain things when it comes to soccer over there that just make it almost impossible for me to get involved. Did you know there are 140 leagues in England?
So many leagues, yeah.
140 leagues in England.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me. Like, how am I? Then there was somebody who was explaining to me the Champions League is not a league; it's more of a tournament. Why the fuck is it called a league? Like, there's so many different things. Every time I'm seeing some league happening, like, oh no, that's just the cup that they play in order to see who goes to this thing, in order to see who goes to this. I don't know. I can't track any of it. But if you told me, all right, streamline. There's going to be a few teams that are supposed to be the best of the best. We're going to make sure the best athletes are here because the money is here. And this is what it is. They've just streamlined and I can mainline soccer now, and I can understand it. So from an international standpoint, for people that aren't involved or don't know about soccer, it makes total sense to me. But I also understand that there's like an Americanized version of this very capitalistic aspect of the way that we look at sports compared to other places. But I mean, come on, I just think that this is where it's going to go.
But it's a bit of a fake promise too, because they're saying like, oh, the best teams are going to this league.
Right. It's not.
It's not. It's just the teams that have the most name recognition. It's like if you said, well, the Chicago Bulls are one of the most famous teams in the world, so they're going to be in this league. And it's like the Bulls are not good. Like,
but I think that's short-sighted, because if the money is involved in this league and these guys have then more money than anyone else, it will farm out the players to make sure that they're going to that league.
But here's the problem. There's 2 problems with that. Obviously, it just reproduces even more the inequality of like the top teams poking all the players and then everyone else just being like shat on, and they cannot have youth players unless they hide them and then all of a sudden show them up for 1 season before they get bought. But number 2 is that these teams right now, you know, they say that they're the best because of their name recognition, but FIFA threw all of their power saying like, if you play in this league, you cannot play in other leagues. And if you are a player in these teams, you cannot play in other competitions, which means that the best athletes in the world are going to have to all of a sudden make the choice, for example, to either play for Arsenal and lose the chance to play with my national team in a World Cup, or go play elsewhere and be allowed to play in the World Cup. So like you actually would be putting these athletes at an absolute pickle, and you would just.
But don't you think, LC, that what will happen is FIFA will launch a Super League? Like they're gonna probably take it. They're just mad that they're not able to make the money off of it.
That's my thing. Is like there's almost feels to be like a fear of missing out. Like to me, it's almost like going to Maryland State Technical University of the Eastern Shore, like a D2 school. Like you understand what you're doing when you go there, and you know your team's not gonna make it to the national championship. And it's just kind of what it is. Like, it's just one of those things where depending on where you're at and depending on your club, you just understand that, like, hey, I'm going to be able to watch soccer, I'm going to be able to watch this sport, but it's not going to be on the same level as those guys. And I can't necessarily be angry with that unless we put together a squad that can do something along those lines. Like, to me, it's just the competition breeds the best of the best, and it just feels as though soccer is way too spread out.
But if you look at how these teams got good, is by using their money to poke youth players or young players from or players developed in other places to bring them to their own teams. And so it's like there's no meritocracy there. It's literally just about money and making.
But it's already happening.
But here's the thing. The way, and this is where the fairy tale of European soccer sort of comes in as well. Arsenal was made by munition workers in the 1880s. Manchester United was made at a carriage and wagon department, and they were just playing like locally. And all of a sudden, now look at them. And as Elsie was saying, it's not the best clubs in the world right now. I'm an Arsenal fan. I know this. And I was pissed off that we were just writing a golden ticket for ourselves to make all this money. Because real quick, all 12 teams would have made about $300 to $400 million a year just for being there. And they cannot be relegated. So even if we finish dead last and I would see Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang just walking around, we're making tons of money and we're eventually getting the best players in the world. And guess what? That kills the Premier League. That kills La Liga because people aren't watching them anymore. These teams would have broken away from their respective leagues to the point where you only have these 12. It turns into an NBA where you only have 30 teams. It turns into an NFL where you only have 32 teams. There is far too much history in this where the Davids versus the Goliaths. That's part of the joy of sports, is
and
allowing
local,
a team in Division 3 to be
local,
able to beat a Premier League team. Go ahead.
And kids to play in their local teams, man. Like in Argentina, like, you know, granted, like most teams are in Buenos Aires because we're a centralized country, and that's a history lesson that I don't have time for. But like in Spain and in a lot of countries in Europe, you go play for your local team, and then you sort of try to get into the youth and first division teams. Division teams within that club. And so like if you don't have that option anymore, like the best that you can get locally is just to play in the shitty liga that nobody watches anymore, then like you're just cutting off any sort of, you know, aspiration to get to the maximum level.
And also, yeah, I mean, I was going to say on the same fairy tale type of thing, the idea of, you know, whenever I play FIFA, I always choose like the Division 3 teams and try to promote myself up, right, and like build through. It's one of those things where I think exactly, I'll say it's pretty cool to see Oldham Athletic, you know, promote and like the community aspect and the almost amateurism, even though they're pros, of being able to play for your local team. And we don't have that in America outside of collegiate sports.
It still feels like what you guys are saying is that it's a fairy tale. Because if you're already saying that the big clubs are already going and buying up all the youth teams anyway, I think people are holding on to tradition and circumstance.
No, but the only thing is that
anyway.
The thing that is cool about that is the relegation and promotion. Right. If the Super League if it was more merit-based where you could be relegated and other teams swapped in, I would be like, 100%. Okay, maybe a little bit more.
I give you that. Because even when I was looking at the Super League, like when I hear Stan Kroenke's attached to something, I'm looking at, all right, where can he make his money and screw over everybody in the process, right? So like my thought process was that what they had rules-based wise for the Super League that I saw, they didn't have it perfected. There needs to be minimum salary caps. There needs to be an ability for people to jump. Right. So, like, I saw it as a problem in the sense of a lot of things. But I think that the inevitability of there being a super league that kind of manages to take control is inevitability. I just think that there is a lot of kinks that need to be worked out before they do.
I'll just finish with this thing. And I see Ben has joined us, so I'll finish with it. This plan was so fucked up that it made people side with FIFA. I mean, FIFA is one of the most corrupt organizations in the world. I would almost call them organized crime. And the world sided with FIFA. I mean, imagine how shitty that plan was. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to take it away, main host.
Well, there it is. And may I just actually finish it with the final words, 3 of them. Fuck Stan Kroenke. He is one of the worst pieces of shit I have ever encountered.
That's how you say that last
via
name.
Social media. My God. Anyway, but let's move on to the NFL, a league that could have been like the European Super League, but that's dead. Thank goodness. We are joined by Benjamin Robinson, who is author and creator of grindingthemocks.com. It is a mock draft aggregator. Ben, how are you doing? And can you tell us just a little bit about your website and your work?
Sure. Doing well. Thanks for having me on. So Grinding the Mocks is a project that combines mock drafts, the wisdom of crowds, and some fancy algorithms to try to predict what happens in the NFL draft. And so been working on this project for the past few years, and really excited what I've been able to do. And we can talk a bit about some of the players for some of your guys' favorite teams and where they might go, and what your team might do to kind of give your team a chance of getting back to the glory days if they ever existed in the first place.
What they did for the Washington football team. Go ahead, Spencer.
I was going to say thanks for joining us. I do have one question for our audience and for myself as an ignoramus when it comes to the drafting cycle and like mock drafts. When the algorithm that you use and the website that you run, what's the accuracy rating and like what's considered to be good accuracy for a mock draft? Say that people make their own mock drafts and it's like, hey, I got 15% right. What's the accuracy that you are usually seeing, and what's considered good accuracy?
I would say that for me, it's more about me being like less wrong than being right. And so I think there's like a lot of kind of people who are trying to be exactly right. And, my approach is kind of rooted in like social science, basically, that the idea that it's really hard to be consistently accurate all the time. So you're much better off kind of taking a look at the other forecasts that exist and doing some sort of aggregation of the two. And that's the wisdom of crowds piece that kind of has existed in history and is used in many different areas today, not just in this space. But yeah, in terms of accuracy, for me, I'm trying to do two things. So number one, I want to, for the most part, be right around, like I was saying, like not always. I'm gonna hit some things exactly, but I want to kind of be around where the players should go. So sometimes you'll see my rankings and see, right now, like on my site, I think like Kyle Pitts is like the third or something player on the board. Like he's not going to go at number 3. But the idea is that there's enough uncertainty in some other parts of the draft that he has a higher overall rating right now. So it's to get close as we possibly can, not necessarily always most accurately, but with a focus on being more right at the more valuable picks. Because although, for example, there's, 1 pick difference between the first pick and the second pick, there's also a 1 pick difference between the 100th and the 101st pick. But we know which pick is more valuable in the draft. It's the first pick. So in terms of how my accuracy numbers, last year, in terms of how I look at it, which is trying to look at the difference between where I expected a player to go and where they actually went, and controlling for making those earlier picks more valuable than the other ones, my mock draft rankings are in like the 90th percentile of mock drafts in the data that I collect. But like I said, what I'm trying to do is in some ways different than some other people are trying to do. And there are kind of lots of different websites that run mock draft contests. And so, there will be people who do better than me. But overall, it can be really hard to do it year over year over year over year. And so like, even for example, the Athletic columnist, writer who covers Washington football team, Ben Standig, is kind of a very well known in the mock draft world. And, last year, if you predicted, the linchpin in the draft last year was kind of the Dolphins. Were they going to draft Tua Tagovailoa, or were they going to draft Justin Herbert? Well, if you thought they were going to draft Tua, then maybe your mock draft lined up a little bit better. But if you thought they were going to draft Herbert, then suddenly your mock draft is like, it can go a lot of places basically. So this kind of says, hey, we're going to listen to the people who have been historically the most accurate and try to kind of weight those higher than others to get as best accuracy as we can, knowing that it's a really hard thing to predict, and we just want to be as close as we can.
And I mean, this year, and we're going to talk about it in just a moment as well, with pick 3 with the 49ers, they could go Mac Jones, they could go Trey Lance, they could go Justin Fields. And based on who you have pick 3, that can go any number of ways. You got 3 main branches over there. Ben, I wanted you to tell me, so this isn't just like 20 mock drafts, 100 mock drafts. How many mock drafts have you aggregated so far this season?
Yeah, it's like over 1,000. So yeah, like, just collecting them throughout the year. It's a slow burn in the summertime, but really after the college football season ends and the Super Bowl ends, I'll be collecting data, quite often. And so I'm not doing it by hand. I use the power of, writing computer scripts to do a lot of that heavy lifting. So don't, pity me, but don't pity me too much, basically, is what I'm saying.
So you're the Nate Silver of NFL mock drafts in a sense. So.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's actually, it's funny, right? But I think you're right on, Kadeen. Yeah, I mean, what there's some things that you can learn from polling aggregation that we can learn from this as well, albeit like the stakes are much higher in an election, and you can view these mock drafts as individual surveys as well. So yeah, there's a lot that you can apply from some of the techniques that like 538 might apply to what I'm doing as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, depends on who you ask when it comes to a presidential poll or your football team. Elsie, did you have a question? I saw you unmute for a moment.
No, I was just, when you mentioned the political thing, I remember before the tragic 2016 election, that there was a similar sort of aggregator of, it asked people to predict the election, and it was trying to get at this like knowledge of the crowds, or I can remember exactly the words you used. And I was just wondering, like, how do you sort of, you said you weight more depending on people's historical accuracy? Because I can imagine, like, if I go onto the NFL draft and I know the rules of football and that's about it, like, I might as well just pick randoms, like, and so how do you sort of discern that on the internet? Are there mock drafts that you're just like, that is so random and so unknowledgeable that I'm not even going to like take it?
Yeah. I mean,
that would be me.
You kind of need to pick and choose. I pick and choose a little bit. Some of it's also about the ease of being able to scrape stuff. Like my idea is like, if you're going to consistently put out mock drafts, if I can set up some automation to make that happen, I'm going to do it. But if you're just kind of like one off or like writing it up on Twitter, like unless you're like a really well-known analyst that I want to have in the data, then I'm probably not going to get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, there's, you were saying that, a lot of people don't need to know a lot about, they might know very little bit about football, but there are, big thinkers in the industry, like thought leaders, like, people who work for ESPN or NFL Network who drive a good amount of some of the conversation about players in the draft, for good or for bad.
Huh.
And, what I mostly recommend is that you really, if you read a mock draft, like just take it as a piece of a puzzle, basically.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons to get kind of very upset about this stuff and to get very mad online. And I just don't think it's worth it. And in fact, I really don't even read mock drafts. I just get the data. And to be honest, like,
you read them differently. You read them differently. You read them right on in that script. Yeah.
I read them directly into the mind. But I mean, there's some people who do a really good job predicting the draft, but I would never want to read their analysis, for example. I'm not going to say anybody, but like some of the analysis can be kind of garbage, but sometimes they're still accurate and do a good job. It just kind of gets like, sometimes you got to pay attention to what they're doing and not what they're saying, is what I'm saying.
Right. Well, hey, perfect. Why don't we jump on into it? Thanks for all the background information, Ben. Kadeen, you want to kick us off with the Washington football team here?
Yeah, so Washington right now, look at last year, Chase Young, just the easiest pick in the world just to make sure that we did, and we got it done, right? 19 right now for Washington kicking off. I look at the team and I see there's a lot of needs that we could have. Like, we could go in a lot of different directions. Some positions I don't want us to touch personally, but what do you think Washington's doing as far as the 19 pick? I'm seeing a couple of those talking heads like you're talking about on ESPN or NFL. Now I'm hearing that they might go running back at 19, or there's some crazier wild things happening. Are they going to trade out of the pick? What do you think is happening with 19? Are we staying there? Are we moving out of it? Are we moving up, moving back? What do you see, or what is the data telling you?
I'd say that when I look at the top positions that are mocked to Washington, you see offensive tackle, quarterback, and outside linebacker. So even with the signing of Ryan Fitzpatrick as a free agent, I don't think you can guarantee him, count on him basically as like a long-term solution at quarterback. Like, people forget, he had a really great season last year, but he's in his upper 30s. So, it's when Father Time hits, it hits really hard. So Washington has some solid options in Kyle Allen and Taylor Heineke, but I don't necessarily think you can count on them to repeat what happened last year, where I think Washington took advantage of a division that was really weak. And this year, I could see Dallas or the Giants taking a positive regression. I don't see the Eagles doing that as much, but yeah, I could see like those other teams kind of overtake Washington, given that they had a really strong defense last year, and that's really hard to kind of continue, like, to be as good as they were year to year. It's like really hard, even if you maintain the same pieces. So, to me, quarterback is a position of question. I don't think they're going to trade up in the draft. I think they're going to kind of stay pat where they are. And so to me, like, offensive line or some sort of kind of front seven defensive playmaker, particularly linebacker, positions that I think that they plan to address in the first round.
Are there names that we should be looking out for in particular?
Sure. I mean, in the middle of that first round, it's kind of a rough spot to be in, and that's what you get when you win the division, even with the record that they had. So in terms of offensive linemen that are available in the kind of middle part of the round, I'd say Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle from Oklahoma State, is a guy who could be available, where he could play a guard or tackle. He was a right tackle in college. Also a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker, who's a guard from University of Southern California, but could also play some tackle. I think those are some guys in terms of the offensive linemen that Washington could target. But in terms of the quarterbacks, I think that they'd have to trade up, and I don't recommend doing that. If they were going to take a quarterback, they should have taken one last year, and they didn't do that. And that's one of the reasons why, if you're picking really high and there's a chance that you think your team is going to be better next year, then you should take a quarterback. And that's why I think the Chargers did it last year. That's why I would think that potentially the Falcons would do that this year. But in terms of linebacker, and the two main guys that I think are targets for Washington are Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. who's kind of a mix between this like a hybrid linebacker that plays on the line and also a safety who can kind of play in some coverage. Is kind of one of those kind of Isaiah Simmons, Derwin James types of players. Didn't necessarily have the kind of hype that those guys did. And then a guy who actually I have in my mock draft that's coming out next week. Yes, I do a mock draft. I do 1 or 2 a year based on the data that I have. I have Washington selecting Micah Parsons, outside linebacker from Penn State.
I would love that.
Who opted out of the 2020 college season, was kind of regarded as a top 10 pick. But with the rise of all these quarterbacks, and I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see a defensive player selected until maybe pick number 10 with the Cowboys. Parsons kind of falls in my mock draft. He had some like very well documented off field. I'm not going to say issue where he was a part of a hazing scheme that went on with the football team. So that's something that's out there. But ultimately, even a guy as talented as him, it's possible to fall in the draft. And so I have him right now in the like mid-teens in my data. But I think there's a decent chance that he could fall to 19 depending on what happens. But yeah, he's the kind of player who can rush the passer and was a really productive linebacker in his during the years he played at Penn State.
Okay, so you mentioned some offensive linemen and a guard position too, which I think is important for people to note because the Brandon negotiations have been sketchy at best. And then we've also talked about the linebackers. I would personally love Micah Parsons at 19, but you also mentioned quarterback, and that's obviously the sexiest position in pro football. Now, your data on grindingthemocks.com, which you should all check out, it's a really awesome site, it even shows you the trends. What quarterback? So we've heard plenty of names, right? So Trevor Lawrence, probably going number 1. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Zach Wilson, probably number 2. But then we mentioned Mac Jones. We mentioned Trey Lance. We mentioned Justin Fields. Is there a possibility that any one of those guys could fall to either 19 or a spot 12, 14, something like that, where you do think Washington goes, you know what? Now let's pull the trigger and let's move up there?
I mean, I think it has to be Mac Jones. I think that there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on in the like mock draft world right now. Like people are kind of thinking like, well, a lot of the consensus around talent evaluators have said that, you know, Mac Jones is kind of like maybe the 20th or 22nd best player in the class and the 5th best QB. So why would the 49ers take him with the 3rd pick? So I think sometimes people are having a hard time imagining, you know, hey, if he doesn't go at 3, and if it is Justin Fields or Trey Lance, you know, where does he go next? And so, you know, it could be barring any trades, and it's really hard to project those, so I don't do them. You know, there's Denver with pick 9, where Drew Lock has really kind of underwhelmed quite a bit, where they could use a quarterback. You know, without any trades, like I said, you know, the Patriots at pick 15 could be open to a quarterback. But, you know, there's Washington and Chicago as well. But there could be teams that we don't think about. Like, you know, for example, last year, the Packers traded up to draft Jordan Love, and we didn't think they were looking for a quarterback, and we didn't think they were going to trade up. So there's a lot of things that could happen on draft night. You know, I still think that I trust the like very like expert sources. And so I expect, even if my data doesn't necessarily show it right now, for Mac Jones to be the pick at 3. I won't change my mind really until I hear it from people who know it. And we may not hear it until very close to the draft, because all these teams and all these individuals are very, 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 very keep that information like very close and secure. So whatever information you're hearing, whatever, you know, betting odds you're seeing, you know, I don't know what to say about that, but yeah, it'll be a fun night. And so the draft kind of hinges around pick 3 and pick 4.
How much change do you usually see? Like, I'm sure your guys are updating the data on the website constantly. Do you see huge shifts as far as the way things are going to happen? Maybe a story comes out, this, that, and the other, where there's a lot of movement in the days upcoming to the draft? Because, I mean, you always hear those stories like a Wonder Lake test gets released or something happens and some guy. And like, is there a lot of shifting right before we're getting to the draft as far as things switching up?
I mean, so the days leading up to the draft, particularly the day before and the day of, are when I'm weighting the mock drafts that I collect the most. So it's like there is some shifting that happens, but it's kind of on purpose, because I want to kind of weight those a lot higher than ones that happened a month ago, because ideally we have more complete information about what's going to happen in the draft the day of, ideally. So that kind of happens a little bit on purpose in how I do what I do. Mock drafts are also kind of a lagging indicator. So, it's also depends on the player. If it's a high profile player, for example, last year Tua Tagovailoa got hurt during a game, and you could see the next week that mock drafts were suddenly kind of dropping him quite a lot. And eventually, it came back to kind of where he ended up going. But they can be, it's sometimes hard to tell what information they're listening to and what they're not. I mean, one thing I've spoken about before is this year we had a lot of players opt out. And so I think some players are having, and there are plenty of reasons to opt out that are rational and totally understandable. And so some players I think are getting, at least in the data that I'm seeing, punished relatively for not playing, while some players are, I think people have forgotten that they didn't even play. So I'm not saying that it's a completely rational marketplace. It's not, but yeah, we do see that the data can react pretty quickly or not as much depending on what kind of event you're talking about. But yeah, we do see it. It's usually a lagging indicator, so it takes some time for the mock drafts to kind of absorb some of that new information and adjust accordingly.
Ben, are there any really interesting facts or trends, or maybe like some behind the scenes trends that you've seen over the time of you doing this? For instance, like a certain position that it doesn't really matter what round you take them in, or maybe a specific round actually has more value than most people assign it to. Anything like that?
I mean, so from my data, I started working on this project in 2018. You really need like 3 years worth of data to kind of even assess any of that stuff. So for the most part, the value in the draft is definitely, a lot of it is contained in the first round. There's a lot of different ways that teams value picks. There's this traditional method that you might hear about called the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart. And it was basically created by the Cowboys to kind of think about how they could think about how picks were valued so that they could make trades in the draft. And they used that chart to wide acclaim so much that their executives started getting hired in other places. And so the chart kind of made its way around the league. And there have been other people who have kind of updated and new values in the chart. And so, yeah, to be honest, I don't have a lot to add on whether there are like some picks or some rounds that are more valuable than others. Every now and then you hear like, oh, the Redskins or the Washington football team is like really good at picking players in the third round, but that's mostly just like small sample size and luck. I don't think it means that like the third round has more value than any other round. It just meant that they got lucky in those rounds. So to me, you still want to have picks in the first round. You don't want to necessarily defer other picks, but there have been like studies that have shown that the value of compensatory picks is a lot higher than it used to be, and people kind of tend to undervalue those. So you see teams that spend a lot in free agency and don't take advantage of some of those rules to kind of suffer a little bit relatively when it comes to getting the most out of the draft capital you have, because for the most part, teams that are kind of consistent, there's really not many teams that are consistently good at picking in the draft. They tend to end up with more swings at the bat, and the more swings at the bat you have, the more likely you are to hit the ball. Just kind of law of large numbers. But yeah, so I don't have a whole lot to add to that. This summer, my hope is to kind of do a kind of 3-year retrospective on the 2018 draft class. So, you'll see how the 2018 Washington football team stacked up to other classes. But in terms of trends that I see, I do pay attention a little bit to which teams tend to draft players earlier rather than later in the draft. And, the teams at the top are teams like the Cowboys and the Bills and the Titans. And then teams kind of closer to the bottom are teams like the Raiders, teams like the Patriots actually as well over the recent years, the Falcons, 49ers a little bit. But yeah, there's quite a different, like there's a number of ways to win in the NFL. So I'm not saying that there's like one way to draft, and it can be in your advantage to draft kind of in a like heterodox way. It makes you like unpredictable, but it also means that you have to get lucky in some ways, I think, more often than not. And so you see like in the 2019 draft, the Seattle Seahawks drafted DK Metcalf in the second round when I thought he was going to go in the first round. And I think they just got lucky there, to be honest, because their first round pick hasn't really even panned out at all. And so you could argue that if they had drafted the same players in the first round and the second round, but I think they got sometimes just a matter of luck that a player can fall to you, and you happen to be in the position to make that move.
Now, when you talk about, luck and just getting lucky like the Washington football team have in the third round, I mean, we're talking about guys like Terry McLaurin, we're talking about like Chris Cooley, Chris Cooley, a legend for the Washington football team. Terry McLaurin well on his way if he continues at this current career trajectory. But in the second round, Ben, they make it look like a skill, the amount they whiff. I mean, there's Devin Thomas, for example. There's Malcolm Kelly, Fred Davis. That was all one draft, and they all sucked.
Fred Davis was good when he played. Don't do that. I mean, he had some legal issues. Leave him alone.
And then we got Preston Smith, who was actually a good pick, but now he's with Green Bay, so he didn't stick around. And then Sua Cravens, Lord knows what happened over there. So let's talk about the second round. What are the chances we get that one right this season? Who are we targeting in the second round?
Yeah, so I have a section on the site where I call the horizontal board. So basically, instead of just doing a vertical one by one ranking of the players, it kind of lets you see which players are in the first round in my data and the second round. And so like in the second round, when you're looking at, so let's say that in my mock draft, they draft outside linebacker, I'm sorry. Then, maybe they come back to offensive line in the second round. And so you have, guys, like if you're looking at the inside interior offensive line guys, it could be a guy like, Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma, or, Dylan Radins from North Dakota State, or maybe like a Wyatt Davis from Ohio State. Like those are players that I think could help Washington in terms of the interior, because I know that's where they've had some issues lately. Those are guys I think that could help in the second round. But it really depends what happens in draft. Like I think that those guys should be available in the second round. Humphrey might not necessarily be around then, but yeah, those are some guys I think that are second round interior offensive linemen that could be deserving of selection.
No, I personally think that Taylor Heineke is going to eventually be the solution and arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks ever to play this game.
But, I was going to say, when you said that they couldn't trust Heineke, I was like, you're going to pick a fight here, man.
You could easily go lineman with the first two picks, and all of a sudden you got one of the best quarterbacks in the league behind a stellar line, and we're just looking at nothing but touchdowns every drive.
Well,
but
what if I told you that rookie offensive linemen don't necessarily, they're like at best will be like average below average.
They're not around guys with the charisma of a Taylor Heineke. So it's a bit different. But anyway, what I wanted to ask you was, let's say they went quarterback. Is it a guy like Kyle Trask from Florida? Is that what we would be looking at in that second round?
I think that the Trask, I think, was a really productive college quarterback. I think he's, deserving of a second round selection, but the hype around second round quarterbacks is really Davis Mills from Stanford, and Kellen Mond from Texas A&M. Those are the two guys that you're hearing the most about. Mond had a pretty successful college career, but I wouldn't necessarily call it, amazing in terms of the types of things he did. But he's a solid player for sure. Davis Mills, he really only had this one last year of starting, but he has and I hate to say this, he has the 5-star quarterback pedigree. And the kind of like look of a quarterback that people like. So, I think that, to be honest, if you asked me which one I like the most, I like Trask the most because he's proven the most. He's played in the SEC, and but I think that potentially he's being outshone at this moment by Mills and Mond. Mond did really well at the Senior Bowl, and so I think that helps a bit as well. But I wouldn't pay attention to too much of the pro day circuit, and I don't think there'll be a sixth quarterback taken in the first round. But in the second round and the third round, those are kind of positions for those three guys to go.
Drafting purely on look of player is one of the worst practices, in my opinion, across sports. Even like pre-Moneyball, for example, when you're looking for just sluggers, for the Oakland A's, he's like, hey, he's pretty big. He's got like a hot girlfriend, so his confidence is high and shit like that. And it doesn't work out. And the same thing, you get Jamarcus Russell. I would do. There's there are plenty of places that do that still.
Here's the website I want. I want no names, just the pictures of everybody. And I just tell you that he looks like a first pick. Right there. He looks like a second pick.
I'll subscribe to that website.
Well, I think a lot of people would, but here's the problem with that. You get your Brock Osweilers all of a sudden. You get your Jamarcus Russells, and you go, that guy's going to be the future, and he is anything but. He's the present for a year, and then he's right the fuck out of the league. I feel like we got to ask this. I know Matt is not here because he was too depressed to talk about the Detroit Lions, and he's trying out for Kadeen's podcast, but we'll do him a solid here. What do you expect from the Detroit Lions in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm bullish on the future of the Lions long term. I think that bringing in Brad Holmes from the Rams was a strong move, and he has a track record of being, really good executive there. And so that's a really good move. And I think, bringing in Dan Campbell is going to be a lot of fun. So hopefully, I think it can't be as boring and bad as it was under the Patricia administration. So I think there's hope there for the future. So they let Kenny Golladay go, and it's because it was just too expensive for them. So they have a pretty big hole at wide receivers. So I expect, one of the top wide receivers would be the guy that they would go after. So in my mock draft, I have the Lions selecting Jamar Chase, wide receiver from LSU. And that's because I assume Kyle Pitts will go above him, and there'll be some quarterbacks and an offensive lineman taken between them. I think there's also a decent chance they could go offensive line if they wanted to. I think something to kind of build around the offense, even though they've got they're the team that I think could use a trade down for sure, because I still think even my Bengals could trade down would probably serve them best, just because they have more than there's more than one. If you have more than one pick in this draft in this first round, I think you'll be better off because you'll be able to add an additional guy to deal with some of the deficiencies that your team might have. So, to me, the trade of Stafford was a smart move because it positions them in the future drafts to take more swings at hitting home runs in the draft. And so to me, yeah, I think it's wide receiver, whether it's Jamar Chase or maybe Jalen Waddle, depending on what happens.
Your Bengals aren't going to be taking Jamar Chase. Just get him and Joey back together, smoking cigars and whatnot.
It could. I think that's definitely possible. I believe strongly in kind of priors and kind of your prior beliefs coming into the draft process. And it's just been Penei Sewell the whole way. And so I felt the same way about Tua. There's kind of a lot of smoke, and it's kind of meant to confuse people. And so I just kind of tend to think I want to look past it. And so to me, I think it'll be Penei Sewell. I think that I think either way, there's a strong chance they go either offensive lineman in the first round, wide receiver in the second, or wide receiver in the first and offensive lineman in the second. And it would be that's kind of, I think, what they would do, just because it's just such an important part of the team to get right.
Perfect. All right. Well, unless there are any other questions, Ben, I just wanted to thank you for coming on and for giving us your time. I know that it is quite the time for you with just a week before the NFL draft, which is next Thursday. Are you doing anything for it? Are you going to be on any streams or anything like that? And feel free to plug yourself right now too as well.
Sure. So, you can follow along at grindingthemocks.com, which is kind of like an homage to Grinding the Tape, which is what kind of scouts do. Grindingthemocks.com. You can find me on Twitter at BENJ_Robinson. And so I post there quite a lot with the Grinding the Mocks hashtag. And then on the night of the draft, starting at 11:30 sharp, I'll be on the Football Outsiders Twitch stream. And so we'll be on for like an hour. I'm going to need to heavily caffeinate at that point. But yeah, we'll be on for an hour kind of talking about the first night of the draft with Aaron Schatz and Mike Tannier and a bunch of the other guys over there at Football Outsiders. So that's what I'll be doing on draft night, along with just kind of sitting back with a cold one, ready to douse that with some coffee to make sure I don't fall asleep.
Dude, absolutely well earned. You've been collecting these mock drafts for plenty of months now and plenty of years now. I'm very excited for the 3-year retrospective as well. Everyone, Benjamin Robinson, thank you so much for joining us, man. This has been
having me.
Awesome. All right, take it easy, brother. Guys, I gotta say, Ben's on and he can hear this. And now he can't. But that guy, so smart, has been doing this for a while and has been relentless all the way through. He just knows his stuff. I remember him talking to me about the origin story about this. He was just watching the draft with a buddy of his, and they were talking about where they would expect people to go, and they were talking about mock drafts. And then he said, well, I'm sure there's a website that aggregates all these and we could just figure out their, average expected draft position. Realized that didn't exist and decided to just fucking make it himself.
That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And to the extent, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that the only thing I know about drafts is that in the NBA, 1999, second round, pick 57. Manu Ginobili.
There it is.
There it is.
The best draft pick ever. I mean, at that stage, second round, 57, you get Manu. That's the best pick.
I mean, I'd counter with Tom Brady, but okay. I mean,
it doesn't matter.
We don't like Tom Brady on this podcast. We're going.
I love Tom Brady on this podcast.
But this is your secondary podcast.
Even with his Qatari ties right now.
But a little bit to like Spencer's question of like, other teams are like better or like do you see any trends? Like, I would love, just because I know more of the NBA, like I would love to know how like the Spurs, I feel like, have been such a good, draft picking, like with Kawhi as well. And like I would love to know that of the NBA like that. I know that he knows his football, obviously, but it would be so awesome just to do the same for a sport that I actually know the names.
Yeah, I wonder if something similar to grindingthemocks.com exists for the NBA as well. I even know that, I mean, he's been working at this so much, talking to so many people. There have been a couple NFL teams contact him about making that data private just for them so that they could figure out what other teams are doing, and all he's doing is just writing some scripts and just automating it so they they're almost in the draft room with the other 31 teams so they can position themselves accordingly. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
I have so many questions too, like as this progresses and a decade goes by. I mean, I'm so interested in diving down into big data on sports, especially. I mean, the idea of like skill positions versus non-skill positions. He says first round draft picks are obviously very valuable, but we know that there are so many flameouts and just busts in every sport. But I would just be interested to know.
And with basketball, which is like there's so many stats too. I know football too, but like I wonder if you can like stats in college can predict like your probability of flaming out. Like if you are a first round pick, for example, like are there indicators in your college career that may predict you will be a first round pick, but may also predict that you may not?
But I think that that's the thing is like when he does the retrospective on like 2018, which is important to me because like one of my hot takes that I would bring to this pod is that I think drafts are completely overrated. I wouldn't build my team surrounding a draft at all, period. I'm more George Allen type. Trade all the draft picks and just build my team through free agency.
Is it too unpredictable for you?
I think it's too unpredictable. Like that to me is where there's so many variables. You can never really call anything as a surefire shot. I mean, there comes to me in my philosophy on bridge quarterbacks, and I think that unless you have a specific system or a specific kind of guy, majority of times you draft a quarterback early, you're going to have them flame out on you, and it's not necessarily a reflection of how good or bad they are. It's just the situation you put them in. And so, like, I really want to see if there are any teams that really you can look over a course of all this data and say, maybe they even have something. Because, I mean, if you hit, in my opinion, if you hit on 20% of your draft picks, 15, 20%, you're probably doing an amazing freaking job. Right. And that's – so it's like if –
Yeah, and Kadeen, I agree. I mean, like, as far as what you're saying, I think of the Patriots, right? I mean, they don't really. Besides Tom Brady, I'm sure that they draft well too.
They don't.
Maybe they don't. But you know what? They find people in free agency, and they're gadget players, and Belichick's ability, or maybe it's even beyond Belichick's ability to take players that are cast-offs and put them into this really militant system, and boom, they're stars again, and they win championships. And I think that it's one of those things for me. If I was a GM, I would never trade a somewhat sure thing that I know that's in the flesh playing for the potential of a better player. I just wouldn't do that.
Ever. And I think that's the thing is when you see it, I think this is why I'm excited about Washington right now is that I think if you're going to attribute Bill Belichick's way of getting guys is that he looks for the most versatile guys. And it's like guys that can come in and play multiple positions. If you're a linebacker, I want somebody who can play inside, outside. I can line up on the line. I can do this. I can do that. I need dudes that can do everything. And he teaches them to learn everything and then do your job. And I think that when you see Ron Rivera and what he's doing in Washington, you see a lot of that kind of guys that, all right, if on offense, we want dudes that can line up wide, line up inside, line up in the backfield, do these kind of things. And on defense, you're kind of looking for that same thing. That's why a couple of these guys, draft-wise, I'm kind of excited about. When I hear about those hybrid-type players that could be safety, go down on the line, play in the box, like I look at that and I'm saying, all right, that's almost the Bill Belichick way. You want dudes that can really play a variety of positions. You can do so much more with those type of people. When I see teams trading like a surefire, even a dude that has any sort of upside for this draft prospect, I'm pulling my hair out because I'm like, you don't know. Why would you ever do something for what you don't know?
I think there's something very enticing about the unknown, and you go, hey, if I hit this, I look like a genius, especially if you're a GM, right? Because your job is to build the best team possible. And what better than a draft pick that could be anything you can imagine, right?
And
so
draft is hope, right? It's hope.
Exactly. When
it's
you have a ton of picks, you go, okay, so this year sucked, let's say, but look at all this. Look at what we have now, and we can make something happen. But you're right. It doesn't occur that often. There is something to be said about drafting a bunch of young guys with potential that only know what the Washington football team way is or the Wizards way is versus, going to another organization, coming here and going, this place is trash. How are you guys any good? They get depressed, and next thing you know, you get no production out of them. But I think the Bucs sort of proved it, right? I mean, they took Tom Brady and they took a number of free agents, Antonio Brown as well. And look, Leonard Fournette, they ended up winning the whole thing.
And if you have a coaching staff Bruce Arians, he had a bit of a knock on him that he was sort of immovable as far as the offensive goes, that he wouldn't necessarily scheme to the players as much as he has a scheme, and guys need to figure out his shit. And I think as the season went on, you saw him and Tom do this give and take sort of thing and find this balance in the middle, and it kind of took off from there. I think if you're a coach, you need to be flexible with the system that you have and try to get some guys in here that can do a lot of different things, or just move around and do some shit. I don't know. That's just.
And the only time that I would trade for picks is that if I had a scenario like the Niners had with Alex Smith and Kaepernick, right, where you see, or with Alex Smith and Pat Mahomes, right, where you see your future and you see the tangible nature of a player that you already have on staff, and you're saying we've got to move someone, the older player or the player that we don't see fitting in long term, and then I could see you saying, okay, we'll trade that player for future picks, but I've never traded a known entity for the potential future without having backup.
I think that's why the 49ers are going to end up going with Trey Lance. So for those of you that don't know, he just has a much higher ceiling, but they love Jimmy Garoppolo right now. So they may do the same thing where Alex Smith played for a year in Kansas City. We all know what Pat Mahomes is now, and plenty of people would have said, well, why didn't you just play him from day one? There's a reason he was this successful. He was sheltered. He was protected, and he got to learn the system. And the moment he came in, bang, he knew everything, and he was ready to roll, and all his talents showed. Same thing the Packers are doing with Jordan Love. I suspect, this is my guess, this is without knowing anything, I suspect Trey Lance is going to end up being that San Francisco 49ers.
10 seconds. I won't knock a team if there's a guy that they want to go get. I don't believe that you're overdrafting or anything. I don't believe in the best player available bullshit because you just don't know. But if there's a guy that you fall in love with and you figure out, I need to go get this person, go do it. Trade as many draft picks you got to go get the guy that you believe is that guy, because it's the only thing you can really hang your hat on. Just go for it.
Yeah, it has to be a quarterback. But, hey, listen, switching gears, speaking of love, there is no love lost between Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. I think Kevin Durant was on some podcast. I don't remember what the name of it was, but he was asked to name the top 5 players he has ever played with. And he started it perfectly. He started by naming his 2 high-profile teammates, Kyrie Irving and James Harden. James Harden, of course, he's played with at OKC and now the Brooklyn Nets. So he's played with him 2 different places. He then named Stephen Clay, totally understandable, 2 of arguably the greatest of all time, except for Steph, who's apparently a bang average player. And then he waited 20
pure fighting words.
He waited 20 seconds, was thinking, you could see his brain moving and stuff like that, almost avoiding Russell Westbrook as much as he could, and concluded with Serge Ibaka. He was then immediately called out by the host to be like, I feel like you forgot somebody. KD goes, I did? Who? And the host goes, well, okay, I'm going to just give it to you, Russ. And KD suddenly goes, oh, yeah, you're right. Of course. How could I forget Russ? By the way, I'd put him above Clay. Does anyone buy that? Spencer, do you buy that he actually forgot Russell Westbrook, or do you think that he knew it and just let it go?
Well, let me tell you, before we get into this, the Durantula Shady Bird, he has been on a tear with his social media accounts. He had that massive public leaked beef with Rappaport, where they were just, I mean, it is not safe for work language. It was insane. He was seen liking a tweet from someone that had 40 followers saying that Steph Curry is a scrub. And that Steph Curry needed Kevin Durant to come to win, he forgot to switch out of his Twitter account or switch his Twitter account. He liked it as the official Kevin Durant Twitter. I mean, the guy's just been on a tear. He must be feeling a little bit sad right now, or he just does not have his confidence, and he's just finding that confidence on social media. I think that there is the tiny possibility that he could have legitimately forgotten because of Steph Curry, in the sense of like that's very recent. He's thinking, if someone asks you on the spot and you're kind of like, well, I got my point guard, my shooting guard, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like Ibaka because that's like a big man. And he's thinking, oh, I already have Steph, Clay, and Harden. But at the same time, like he played with Russ for longer than anyone. And that's just a huge diss. Although it must be good as a Wizards fan, because that's just going to feed Russell Westbrook's intensity over the next couple of weeks.
Ready to go. You know what it reminds me of when, and it's funny that Kyrie was his first pick, because do you remember when Kyrie said about Kevin Durant, like, it's nice to finally play with somebody that I can give the ball. I know that he's going to score.
Citing LeBron.
Forgetting that he had played with like the king, LeBron James. And so like, is there like these two pick each other as like number one? What is this like bromance that just makes you overlook absolute, like you said, right? Russ triple double. What is it? More than 25 on 4 different teams. Guy averaged a triple double in a couple of seasons, I think. LeBron, I don't need to say anything. It was funny the other day on Twitter, when LeBron had a tweet. This story said like, Los Angeles Lakers power forward LeBron James, and I'm like, he doesn't need that introduction. Like, you can just say LeBron, and that we all know who he is. But yeah, what is it with these guys who play with absolute stars? Just ignoring them, forgetting from, or I don't know. Is it on purpose? I don't know.
I think that there's a legitimate chance, like Spencer said, that he just forgot.
Sure.
And I think I'd give anyone on the planet except Kevin Durant the benefit of doubt.
Totally, absolutely.
He is too petty to not know that he was doing it, right? Like he's Sun Tzu of pettiness, okay? He knows what he's doing every time he does. He knows what he's doing. And I think right now we're reaching ultimate peak KD pettiness. I can't wait for his basketball career to end, because Lord knows this podcast is going to be the greatest one ever made. It's going to be amazing.
Since we talk so much about odds with the draft, what are the odds if the Wizards end 10th? That we play the Nets at some point?
We're gonna fuck them up.
What needs to happen?
Let me tell you, when
I would love to see Russ just
that'd be amazing.
When I made that dollar bet that the Nets were gonna make it to the finals, I did not factor in that this was gonna happen. Because once this occurred, the Wizards are on a 6-game win streak.
Yeah.
Russ is averaging a triple-double again, and he's totally healthy. You could even make a case he's all NBA at this point. It is. The Nets they're in trouble. They do not defend right now. The Daniel Gafford trade for the Wizards has been unbelievable. They are 8-1 when Daniel Gafford plays. Russ, it's the easiest assist in the world. He literally takes 3 dribbles and just tosses it in a 20-foot radius, and Gafford just throws it down. It's been so refreshing for everybody.
I think just to touch quickly on Russell, or on the Wizards, but on Russell, in the most recent game, what are they playing? They were losing.
Warriors.
The Warriors. Yeah, how could I forget? The Warriors, Russell had a terrible game throughout up to the mid fourth quarter. I think he was 2 for 11 or something. Like he was just not shooting well. I don't want to say he had a terrible game. He was just not shooting well. But the way the Wizards turned around in the fourth quarter, like, that gives me hope, because that's usually the opposite, right? We've usually seen the Wizards sort of control the game and then just completely crumble and collapse. And so, like, if Russell can have the mental fortitude to be 2 for 11 and then say, like, I'm going to take over this game anyway, and like go for it. And I know that obviously it wasn't just him in the end of the game, but like, that to me shows the most hope. The fact that when you're having such a terrible shooting game, you still say, I want the ball. And I know that's him. I want the ball. I want to go and get this game.
And yet you can't forget that they were rattled. Denny, right, goes down with an season-ending injury, and that would rattle a lot of teams into either firing them up to win, which I think that actually did, or it rattles you into saying it's just not, the game's not worth it.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I tell you what, that is a doozy. I forgot in the State of the Union. Thank you for mentioning that. Denny Avdia is lost for the season. He exited on a wheelchair. But yeah, like Elsie said, one of the things that makes Russ one of the best players and one of the worst players at times is his sort of goldfish memory, right? He'll take a jumper no one wants him to take, and he'll happily take it again. And then once it's the fourth quarter, he always gives 100%. That's the other thing about the comments. Ultimately, it doesn't change the level of effort he's going to put out because he's constantly going at 100% all out. And that's why people adore and love Russ. I'm so glad he's on our team. If the Nets and Wizards play, the Wizards have beaten the Nets a bit more. Now, were the Nets ever at full strength? No. But that would be a dynamite series. I would be so excited for it. Man. And Elsie, maybe we need to buy some tickets, and then we need to sneak down to the lower bowl again because
I'll be fully vaccinated, man.
Yeah. Hey, last time we did that, we had ourselves a classic where LeBron hit that bank shot. That was a commercial for the NBA for 4 years.
That's one of the best and worst memories.
Right. I know. Absolutely insane. Any final thoughts on this KD Russ stuff? Do you think the Nets, dollar bet, do you think the Nets and Wizards will play in the playoffs because fate?
I feel like you need some odds for that one.
Sure. I will say if you're right, just simple 2-1. Let's do that. If you're right, then you win $2. If you're wrong, dollar lost.
I'll take him playing just because I want to see it happen.
Okay,
I didn't get my Oral Roberts Colgate. I want to get.
I'm gonna hedge. I'm gonna hedge again. So I did a hedge last week. I'm doing another one. I would gladly pay you $2 if it means we're seeing.
I feel like I owe a few people a few dollars, and I'm just gonna sit.
The beauty of it is you never really keep track. But that's just sort of the running bit.
It all evens out in the average.
If you get into real debt, you will get a Venmo request. Don't you worry about that. Anyway, boys, this is District Divided. I am a host, Amit Singh, alongside with me, Kadeen Wiggins, aka K. Lautaro Cabrera, aka LC, and Spencer Brudig, who is champion Steph Curry.
MVP.
Do you stand by that despite Kelly Oubre and Jordan Poole being the better players?
I saw Also, I was going to say Kadeen Wiggins' namesake, Andrew Wiggins, man, he is no help. And he missed that. Good. He missed a wide open. That man has a 40-inch vert. He is 6'8". He doesn't slam that. It's like that scene in Anger Management where he's like, dunk the ball. It's just crazy.
My cousin's struggling.
My last thought is I saw this awesome thing. Stephen A. essentially was saying, I don't agree with a lot of the time with him, but he was saying that when Steph Curry did what he's doing now back in 2015, 2016, it was like totally and utterly revolutionizing the game. And so people gave him the MVP because he absolutely deserved it because he was transcendent. And now he's doing it. What I think of the storyline is that he's doing it at 33 and he's having one of the best seasons of his entire career. He's leading the league in scoring over your precious Brad Beal. But the whole point is that he's no longer the MVP because he's already done it. And now everyone's jacking threes from 30. And so it's no longer the transcendent game that it once was. I totally and utterly disagree, but I can see why people might say, oh, Steph's like only a top 10 guy. I think he's absolutely MVP, best player in the world right now.
Fair enough. I mean, I can understand that. I think you can make the same case for Russ having normalized the triple-double as Matt keeps talking about. But yeah, no, Steph is unbelievable. He's leading by 1/10 of a point overall per game. So let's cool the Jets
check in next week.
The Jets a little bit there. And when you get swept by the Wizards, are you even? I don't know. Put the Wizards in a super league with the West. Let's
really quick. His last line was over the last 3 weeks, averaging 40 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds on 50, 50, 90 shooting.
Jesus.
You know what he shot? When LC was saying 2 of 11 was bad, Steph was 2 of 14 from 3 last night.
Okay, he ran into the Wizards wall. Okay, it's no big deal.
Yes, he did. They can't defend. Anyway, that's going to do it, folks. We will see you guys next week.
Nice, good camel.
Oh, there we go.
That Turkish tobacco hit's just a little different.